Do, 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 do. Come on in here, everybody. Good Sunday morning. Hey, come on in. Get in here. Get your beverage. I said coffee in the description, but I'm actually, I've been up for several hours. I've had my coffee, and I've moved on to the Zola Espresso. Simultaneous sip. Join me. Good beverage. All right, so I just tweeted, and I had to come on here and talk to you about this. So Maggie Haberman of the New York Times tweeted, I think it was this morning, and she's talking about the Michael Wolff book, and this is what she says. She says, even if some things are inaccurate or flat out false, there's enough notionally accurate that people have difficulty knocking it down. How long did it take her to compose that tweet? So, notionally accurate. So, there's full acknowledgement by the press that the Michael Wolff book is at least partly bullshit. And they say that plainly, that some part of it is just not true. Now, they don't offer an estimate of what percentage of it is true. It would help, for example, if we knew that 80% of it was true or 10% of it was true. But if you don't know that, it's kind of hard to judge that book. And if you're a legitimate news organization, would you promote and talk about and feature a book that is possibly more lies than facts? I mean, you don't know one way or the other. Is that responsible journalism? Now, I realize it's not them writing the book, but when you feature it as a thing which is notionally accurate, you're kind of reporting that it's worth a read. And does anybody recognize the phrase notionally direct? There it is. I was waiting for somebody to point out that I've been saying for a couple of years that when President Trump uses hyperbole to persuade, that he is consistently directionally correct, even if his facts don't check. So what I mean by that is that, let's say he's trying to defeat ISIS, he might tell us that that they're a bigger problem than we thought, so that we would try harder against them. And then he might quickly tell us that he's winning more readily than prior administrations. Now, the effect of that would be that ISIS would think, damn, we're really losing here. This guy's killing us. But it might not be exactly accurate. So a lot of the things that the president does, he sacrifices technical accuracy to get a good result. And I've described that as being directionally accurate. Now, the president is also not a news organization. He is a leader, and leaders persuade. Now, in a perfect world, the leader would persuade using only concrete facts that everybody agrees on. In the real world, that doesn't really happen too much. You know, it's more the case that there's a little bit of hyperbole, a little bit of, credit grabbing, a little bit of deriding your nemesis a little too hard, that sort of thing. So in the political world, I feel a little more flexibility about accepting bullshit if the purpose of it is to lead the country someplace good. So, for example, when the president says, hey, the economy is going to be great and it's all me and I've done this and that and it's going to drive the economy higher, we all want a higher economy. There's no bad in that. So the fact that he uses a little hyperbole, maybe the facts don't exactly check, maybe he's taken a little more credit than he should for the first year, does it matter? Well, not really. It's directionally very favorable for everybody involved. It's good for him, because it makes him look good, if you believe it. And it's good for the people because it increases business optimism because people say, hey, I guess things are doing well. We better invest. And then the economy goes up. So in a leadership mode, a little bit of exaggeration, a little bit of ignoring the facts that you're ignoring is not a bad thing. As long as it's leading you toward something that everybody would agree is good. Defeating ISIS, improving the economy, that sort of thing. But if you're a legitimate news organization and you're helping Michael Wolff sell a book that you can't even determine if it's 80% bullshit or 10% bullshit, but you know for sure that a substantial part of it is bullshit, I'm not sure that you have achieved, let's say, journalistic integrity by promoting that book. Now, I realize it's hard to ignore because it's the big story, but there probably is a better way to go about it than to suggest that people read it. And we saw Stelter say that the other day from CNN. He said, well, a lot of this we know is not true, but you should read it with a skeptical mind. Jake Tapper said the same thing in a tweet that everybody's conscious that some of it, we don't know what percentage, is not true, but you should still read it anyway, but with a skeptical mind. Does that feel right to you? That if we don't know how much of it is true, and it could be a lot of it is not, or it could be that the parts that are not true are maybe only 10%, but they might be the 10% that matter the most in terms of how it makes us think of things. So I feel as though a decent respect to the truth, if you happen to be in the truth business, which the press is, they're in the truth business, as opposed to a politician who is really in the leadership business, and they're massaging truth as it needs to be massaged for both good and bad reasons. But if you're in the truth business, is it fair to say you should read a book that might be mostly bullshit or bullshit in some very key parts, and you can't tell which ones are real? Let's say that's an open question. But I want to make a bigger point about this today. One of the reasons that Trump has been beating everybody from Clinton to the Bushes to other Republicans to Democrats and to the press is that he does use persuasion first, and in his leadership position he can ignore some facts, and it gives him sort of a superpower because he can sort of create a reality that best suits the objective of, we hope, moving the country ahead to make America great again. And the press has been sort of limited because they had to just report what's true. So to the degree that some part of the press was clearly just an enemy to the president, meaning that they wanted him to be impeached, they wish he had not been elected, and they don't want him to succeed. And it's obvious which parts of the press fit into that category. Maggie Haberman, I think, would be near the top of the list of people who are just anti-Trump. And there's not really any ambiguity in this case. So for the first time, we're seeing the press using the nuclear level tools that the president has sort of had all to himself, which is the ability to just make up a reality. So now the New York Times appears, and maybe CNN to some extent as well, they seem to have freed themselves from facts for the first time. Because the news organizations that were anti-Trump always were a little bit handicapped because their brand required them to stick to the facts. And if they got something wrong, they would correct it whenever it was pointed out. And I think that in the past they've all been pretty good at correcting inaccuracies eventually. But this is all new territory. They found this clever workaround where the press itself doesn't need to say something that's false. They can simply do an interview about a book that's full of falsehoods or has some number of falsehoods. We don't know what percentage. So Michael Wolff has given them this weapon that they can use in a way they've never been able to generate persuasion with just facts. They're generating their persuasion through bullshit, but they can do it sort of in that gray area of ethical behavior by simply saying, well, we didn't write that book. We're just telling you what it says, and some of it's true and some of it's not. So be skeptical. We're just reporting what the book says. So they managed to find a workaround that is really powerful. Let's talk about probably the main point of the book, that it's all about the president's mental health, or just mental capacity, I guess. I saw a clip where Dershowitz was talking about the 25th Amendment, and I didn't know too much about the 25th Amendment, and you have to admit that one of the great things about the whole Trump experience from the election until now is that we've all learned a whole bunch about how the government works that we never cared about before. There's just all these things we learned. And one of the things we've learned is more about the 25th Amendment, which apparently, I think it requires the vice president to declare that the president is unfit, and then some number of people in Congress, is it 60% or something, have to vote that he's incompetent, and there might be other parts of the procedure. But as Dershowitz pointed out this morning on Fox News, the Trump we see is exactly the Trump that we have seen and exactly the one that we elected. We, meaning the people that voted. I didn't vote. But it's hard to say that somebody is crazy when they just did all the things that he did and is coming off a super successful year. Now, I, for one, am fully in favor of a psychological evaluation of the president. But I think we should say, I'd love to see it as more of a standard, meaning that if you're over age 70, maybe it's 65, but let's say over age 70, your annual physical should just automatically include a mental test, because we know that the risks of any kind of decline go way up after 70. So I would be perfectly fine with this president or any others submitting to, just normal psychological testing once a year just to see how things are going. There are actually people who don't like that idea. That's interesting. Why would anybody be against that? I don't know the argument against it. Is there an argument against having just a regular scheduled psych evaluation test for, let's say, people over 70? Bias? Well, there's probably a way to get more than one doctor involved. And yeah, wouldn't you imagine that if one doctor, interviewed the president and said, hey, I see something here, you would just have a process that says, okay, let's get 5 other people involved who don't seem to like they're too much in the bag for one side or the other. Well, those of you who say that bias is a problem, it certainly would need to be addressed, but I can't imagine not wanting that information. So anyway, so back to Dershowitz's point. It seems, as Alan Dershowitz pointed out, it seems hugely unlikely that based on anything we've seen so far of the president, that Mike Pence would declare him unfit for office. It seems like really no chance of that. So what's interesting is that the opposition to the president, here's the important point, so everything is sort of building up to this point. The opposition has chosen a primary strategy that almost has no chance of working. And they've sort of talked themselves into it because the way confirmation bias works is that you could find 1,000 reasons to think that the president is crazy. That doesn't mean he is. It just means that that's how confirmation bias works. So if you think that the way he was holding his water bottle, this is one of the evidences people say, he picked up his water bottle and he had two hands on it for a moment and then took one away, and people are saying, well, he must be losing his fine motor skills. Maybe, but he also golfs twice a week. You know, don't you think somebody would notice that his putting is a little off? Well, maybe they have noticed and we don't know. But the point is that confirmation bias would make a lot of innocent things look as though they're more meaningful than they are. So the Trump opposition is going to have plenty of food to eat, but if they spend all their time on that, it's ultimately going to be a dead end, just as dead as the Russia thing was. So if we get to, and I would argue that even the 2018 election, if we get there and he's still just the same guy and he's still just doing some provocative tweets and saying some things that people don't like, I think the left will have self-immolated for the third or fourth time in a row, right? Because they certainly self-immolated when they executed Bernie in favor of Hillary Clinton. All right, so that was the first time they made a gigantic strategic mistake, if you can call it that, because it wasn't exactly a strategy. Then, of course, there was the way Hillary ran. That was probably a mistake in retrospect. You know, people second-guessing it, saying that she didn't do that right. Then we've watched a whole year of he's incompetent and he's Hitler, but coming off of the first year, he clearly got a lot done that he said he would, and the confirmation bias that he's Hitler is actually moving in the other direction. So he's less Hitler every day, so that illusion just is sort of falling apart now. So the left has picked one losing strategy after another to go after Trump. And this one is probably more transparently a terrible idea than anything they've done before this. You know, you could argue that everything they did up to this point, even though it didn't work, was, a good try. It was certainly a good try to try to label him as, a damn Nazi before the election. That was good persuasion, just wasn't true, but it was a very effective strategy. In the end, it didn't work. But this whole he's crazy part, that, unless it's actually true, and who knows, maybe the stuff we don't see is scary. But the stuff we do see, that, when he's at a rally or he's doing a press conference, or even when he's tweeting, in my opinion, look so amazingly competent that it's really hard for me to believe that when he walks off the stage from a rally in which he just, captivated tens of thousands of people, got national coverage, every bit of it was funny, on point, engaging, persuasion perfect. When he walks off the stage after doing something that very few people in the world could do or ever will be able to do, are we to believe that as soon as he walks off the stage, he turns into a babbling 5-year-old? Because that's what the Michael Wolff book says. He says, don't trust your eyes. Don't trust what you're seeing every day, but trust what a known liar put in a book. So that's the best attack that the anti-Trumpers have right now, is there's a huge liar who's said something in a book full of huge lies that everybody says has huge lies in it. That's the best they got. Now, if it sounds like I'm criticizing Michael Wolff, let me be consistent with, something I've been doing since the beginning. People criticize me for saying good things about President Trump's skill as a persuader and ignoring the ethical elements of that. Now, I ignore the ethical elements usually because I figure it's obvious to everyone what is ethical and what is not, and you don't really need another person weighing in on that. I'm not your pope. I'm going to do the same thing with Michael Wolff, which is I'm going to stay objective, and I'm going to say that as an author who's trying to sell a book, he is nailing it. Say what you will about Michael Wolff. You can have any personal opinion you want about him as a person. You can have any opinion you want of what he has done in the past professionally, good or bad. I'm not talking about that at the moment. But on the basis of, did he write a book that a lot of people are going to read and, create this craving for it? And, and did he do it through persuasion that might not pass the fact-checking, and in fact did not? That was good persuasion. It wasn't just good. It's like really good. So let me give a compliment to Michael Wolff for taking really, he took the Trump playbook and just moved it to a different realm that is somewhere between news and politics, right? So you've got politics over here, that's Trump. You've got the New York Times and CNN, that's news on this side. And then right in the middle, Michael Wolff found a slot where he wasn't quite news and he wasn't quite politics, but he made everybody need to pay attention. So really, really, really good. Good publicity, good authoring, good publisher. And he apparently has a really strong team, because they pushed up the publishing, they seem to be defending him, etc. So he's nailing it on the capitalism side. But I leave you to make your own judgments about him personally, as I leave you to make your own judgments about President Trump. Keeps him away from the real topics like the economy and stuff. Yeah, of course. That is exactly what it did. No kneelers made the playoffs. Is that true? Is it true that no kneeling team made the playoffs? Can anybody confirm that? That's true. Now, I don't want to claim success on that because there are a lot of variables and I'm not sure exactly how to measure that stuff. But back when I said that kneeling would be a disadvantage, it would be a distraction, and it might, take you out of the aggressive, kill the other side mindset. Is anybody here willing to call my prediction accurate? Because there's also a big element of chance involved here. I don't know what are the odds that the kneeling teams would not make it in the playoffs. Yeah. I think it's fair to be skeptical on that, only because it's so hard to measure whether something happened or didn't. But what is true, can we say that my idea was certainly not disproved? Would it be fair to say that my theory that the kneelers would perform worse has not been falsified? We can say that, right? It's a little bit harder to go all the way in and say, yes, we can rule out the fact that it was coincidence and we can identify it as this one cause. I think that would be a big leap. But I would ask you to, here's how you should evaluate that. Rather than looking at just the kneeler situation and whether I got that prediction right or not, I want you to look at how unlikely that prediction was. By the way, is there anyone else who made a prediction like that? Have you heard of anybody else who was not me who said that the kneelers would perform worse? I don't know if anybody else in the public made that kind of a prediction. All right. So I would ask you not to judge my predicting value based on that thing, because it's just hard to identify whether that made the difference or not. But I would look at my portfolio of predictions, especially the weird ones, and see how often I get them right. Because even though luck would allow me to get some things right, if I get enough of them right, luck becomes less and less of a explanation. So, for example, just saying that the president would win was an unlikely prediction that happened. Saying that he would have a great first year that would go through a certain cycle of, Hitler incompetent, and then, well, okay, he got stuff done, but we might not like it. I was completely accurate on that. And also, as far as I know, the only person who was saying it. I never heard one other person who made that specific prediction, and over such a long period of time. I also made the John Bolton mustache prediction. You can see that in my book, Win Bigly. So back at the time he was being considered for the State Department, or Secretary of State, I said that mustache would be a problem. I wrote that in my blog too. And sure enough, now we see reporting that says it was a problem. These are very unusual predictions. Very unusual. You might remember that a Nobel economist said that, this is Krugman, said that the day after Trump got elected, the stock market might fall and never recover. I had been saying since early on that that the president's talent and persuasion would have a direct impact on the economy, because economies work on psychology, and he would work on psychology directly. I was right on that. So I would just look at my full portfolio, and you will see that some of them are wrong. So, for example, back when we were trying to guess who would be the vice presidential pick, I got that wrong. I also was wrong that by now the president would have done more for race relations. I would have expected more. I don't know if I'm not sure if that ever turned into an actual prediction. Oh, here's one that I got wrong. I predicted that his approval rating would be higher by the end of this past year. Now, I was completely wrong on that, but not exactly for the wrong reason. It turns out that these days, presidential approval just doesn't mean what it used to mean. Think about, if you're old enough, think back to a prior election. And I'll give you one example. When Al Gore was running against Bush Jr., I preferred that Gore win the election. I know you hate that, but just don't get derailed by that fact, all right? And just think about the fact that, I thought Gore was a better choice. But the very next day after the election, when Bush Jr. won the election, the thing I said to myself was, let's give him a try. Let's see how he does. He's got a business mind. He comes from a political family. He's got the Republican Party backing him. Let's see how he does. So even though I had a preference for the other candidate, they weren't so different in my mind that I wasn't willing to give the other guy a fair shake. Now fast forward to 2016. Because the sides were so polarized, there really were not people like the way I was that I just described. The opportunity for people in the middle to say, hey, we'll give this new guy a chance. Let's just see how he does. All right, I'll reserve judgment. It wasn't the one I voted for. I'm going to reserve judgment. Give him a year. See how he does. All right, that didn't happen this year. And when that doesn't happen, then a presidential approval poll doesn't mean anything. Because it was easy for me to say, well, I would have preferred Gore, but let's give Bush a chance, because I was never that far off on the two of them. But there is nobody who voted for Clinton, or there are very few people, let me take the absolute out of that. It's very rare that there's somebody who was a big Clinton voter who said when the president was elected, let's give him a chance. Let's give him a year. You know, he wasn't the one I picked. We'll give him a year. None of that happened. So anybody who's still talking about presidential approval polls, you're sort of in the past. You're sort of stuck 4 years ago, you know, at least. Today, the polarization doesn't allow people to move from, you know, one preference to the other. It's just too big of a gap. It's not going to happen. The Sabo posters, I don't know what that is. All right. Yeah, so I was just saying that my prediction that Trump would have higher presidential approval by now was wrong, but not for the wrong reason. Because if you look at how well he's done really well. Right? Normally, that would be enough to raise your approval ratings. But we're not in that age when that is a thing that actually happens. Oh, we all knew posters. Huh? Yeah. To talk about Stephen Miller, I only saw a very brief clip of Stephen Miller being interviewed by Jake Tapper. I understand from an article about it, it didn't go well. I need to watch the whole interview. It looks like it was a good one. I'll do that later. It's probably online. Yeah, something tells me that all of the Trump supporters are going to think Stephen Miller dominated and won the interview, if that's a thing. And everybody who's a Trump hater is going to think, thank God, Jake Tapper cut him off. He was just babbling nonsense. Yeah, so people are going to see whatever they wanted to see in that interview. But I would say, you know, without watching the interview, I would say the following. Jake's really good at what he does, and Stephen Miller is really good at what he does. So chances are they were both, you know, have full power, and your bias will make you decide which one you thought was the winner. He was low energy. All right. Do you think more people kneeled after Trump spoke out? Well, yeah, wasn't there an immediate reaction after Trump made his comment about the kneelers? Weren't there more teams that kneeled or knelt as a reaction to his comments? What's the answer to my question from last time? I'm not going to tell you. There's a reason I can't tell you. And I have to say, I'm astonished that not one person got the right answer. And the fact that nobody got the right answer is hilarious to me. It's hilarious. No, it's not Kanye. So the question was, what other public figure once referred to himself as a genius, and also knew that while he or she would be mocked for years for saying that it would still end up positive for him or her? I can't answer the question, sorry. But let's just say that a few people have figured it out, but they may not know. They may not know why they figured it out. They may not know where it came from. Yeah, I guess it turns out a lot of people have called themselves geniuses. It's a fairly popular thing to do. I just saw myself in a list with Adolf Hitler and Howard Dean. You know, as the suggestions were going by, it was like Adolf Hitler, you, meaning me, Howard Dean. That's the first time I've ever been in that list. I can't tell you. No, it would ruin it if I told you. You'll just have to wonder.